early dinner with a snack in the middle. You could miss breakfast, have lunch and an early dinner. What I'm hearing from you, however, is that you really want to avoid the big, even or just late dinner. You just don't want to eat too close to bedtime.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about these MCTs, medium chain triglycerides? These were very popular in the health and kind of biohacking space a few years ago. The whole bulletproof coffee notion, MCTs, butter, coffee, and that's more or less faded away.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of people putting oil in their coffee these days, or coconut. What are some of the known benefits of MCTs? Where do you find them, and what brought you to them as a research topic?
This was the topic for my PhD dissertation. So my PI got a grant looking at medium chain triglycerides. He had done prior work on this, but what we did was use purified MCT oil. So this is only liquid oil that contains 8 carbon and 10 carbon chain fatty acids. Those are not very common in our general food source. So it was purified extracted oil that we then gave our participants. We had created this functional oil that contained flaxseed oil also to be able to get some omega-3 fatty acids in there. We had added plant sterols because that was a big focus of my lab at McGill. Plant sterols for cholesterol reduction and reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. And but the idea was to evaluate the impact on energy expenditure because the way we process medium chain triglycerides is different than how we process long chain triglycerides. So the 12, 14, 16 and up carbon chains. So the medium chain triglycerides, they travel directly to the liver, they get metabolized, we burn them off more readily than the long chain triglycerides that travel across the peripheral circulation, get deposited in adipose tissue and a sort. And so what we found, we did 2 separate studies in men and women. In both men and women, there was an increase in thermic effect of food. So you burned slightly more calories from the meal that contained medium chain triglycerides compared to the meal that contained your standard fat. For my PhD, the first study we did in women. And we were trying to match the saturated fat content of the diets because medium chain fatty acids are by default saturated. They're 8-0, 10-0. So I said, okay, we're going to try to compare that to a saturated fat matched control comparison. And we used beef tallow. It was a lot of beef tallow. Participants were not happy with that diet.
Eat it direct, like spoonfuls of beef tallow? We
put it onto mashed potatoes. You know, when you're doing studies like this where you're trying to control the diet and you want to isolate one aspect of it, right? When we gave real foods, half of the total fat of the diet came from the medium chain containing and the beef tallow. So it's like 20% of your fat from one of the two. So you have to pour it, mask it somehow. And
MCT? There's also this issue about laxative effect of MCT oil that
we had a few participants who initially felt a lot of gargling when, like, just gargling from their stomach, from consuming MCT, because it was a lot early on. It resolves. So after a few days, it was fine. It was a 1 month, 4-week study. So after a few days, no one dropped out for, any GI issues.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Yeah. So beef tallow it was initially. Beef tallow, because it has a lot of saturated fat, is solid at room temperature. So as soon as your food started to get a little colder, it would kind of gel on your plate.
Yeah, it's sort of like if you bring French fries home from a restaurant, they use tallow and then you put it in the fridge because you thought you wanted them as leftovers the next day. They're sort of like in this stuck to bottom of container configuration. Yeah, it's not very appetizing.
Not appealing. No, there's it's white all underneath.
Yeah, that almost always goes into the trash.
A couple of women felt it gave them headache. Just the smell of it,
So with the MCTs, significant increase in thermic effect of food?
That was statistically significant. Yeah. It was about 45 to 50, 60 calories.
Oh, I thought you were going to say percent increase.
No. So it's a small change, but it was, if you're going to use this versus that, you're getting a little boost here. If you repeat this a few times in a day, because when we measured the thermic effect of food, we measured it only after over one meal, but repeated over 3 meals per day over a certain period of time, We did find changes in body composition, improvements in weight status with medium chain triglyceride consumption.
Lean mass to fat mass ratio.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then we did follow-up study of a weight loss study with medium chain triglyceride. This time around, it was just purified MCT oil, not added with other types, versus olive oil, which is much more acceptable, and found greater weight loss with MCT.
Based on what you're saying, it's reasonable if somebody wants to improve weight loss. I'm hearing a sort of a constellation of things. Shift your meal timing to in the first 2/3 or so of your day, which sounds like it will also improve sleep, which will also improve
your ability,
appetite and food regulation, satiety and hunger signals. What is it, like a tablespoon or two of MCT per day? Is that kind of what this looks like for the typical person?
Yeah, about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
In place of some other oil, not in addition.
Not in addition, correct.
Okay. Some ginger.
Yeah.
Are they additive? Are they synergistic?
I think they could probably be additive because I think that the impact is through different mechanisms. Obviously, no one's tested that. It's interesting you bring it up this way because it makes me think of David Jenkins and the Portfolio Diet. It actually made the New York Times, I think it lasted in December.
I'm not familiar.
The Portfolio Diet was a diet he designed for maximal cholesterol reduction. So it was initially designed to have 4 specific foods. So it was high in soy protein, nuts, plant sterols, and soluble fiber.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one to get past most of the American public. I'll tell you, as a public health educator, I don't care if it comes out in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the New Yorker, and everything in between. People hear soy.
Yeah.
Nuts they like, but easy to overeat. They hear plant sterols and like they're someplace else.
This diet went on a head-to-head comparison with lipid-lowering agent, right? Like a statin.
Like a statin.
Yeah. They had the same cholesterol reduction as a statin.
As a statin.
Yeah.
The Portfolio. Interesting name. People are definitely unhealthy in this country, and if they can lower blood lipids,
they've expanded it to be more flexible. So it's not just soy protein now; it also includes legumes. They've added monounsaturated fats, so olive oil.
When I look at a diet like the Portfolio diet, which I only know what you just told me about it, or I think about the current food suggestions by the FDA, which are, we could call it kind of, it emphasizes unprocessed and minimally processed food. So I think that's a step in the right direction, certainly. We look at these, the issue that always comes up for me is I think, okay, in a more plant-based, grain-heavy nut diet, it's very easy for people to overeat calories based on this whole like amino acid protein foraging hypothesis. This idea that we eat until we get enough of the amino acids we want, like a chicken breast or something, and a couple eggs or 4 eggs or something is very satiating. Whereas we can eat a lot of grains and nuts before we kind of go, okay, that's enough. There seems to be this issue, like how do you ensure cardiometabolic health while quelling hunger? And we can't have people walking around hungry all the time. And the GLPs help with that. And it does get down to sort of like, do you include animal-based foods or not often? So how do you think, just from a public health perspective, that we can reconcile this? Because clearly the highly processed food diet is not going to work. The standard American diet, I think that is fading away. But now there's this kind of polarization of like, are we going to go mostly plants, grains, nuts, and I think low saturated fat, blood lipids improving? Or are we going to think like, more protein satiety? Do you see where I'm getting at here? Like, I feel like this is the contour of things.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's no reason to pit one another against the other, right? So like this one-on-one. But what's important is that also having a diet that's more plant-based, has higher volume, that's filling. It's hard to eat a lot of food. So if your food volume is high but does not provide as much calories, you'll get that satiety from the food volume. And then you put in some nuts, helps to prolong this satiety because then you get some protein, some healthful fats. And so I think that's important. I'm not saying animal products are bad. I think they're important for a diet. I think they're important for health. It's just a matter of portion size and making sure that there's not overemphasis on animal products over plant-based products, because we know that plant-based products are so much healthier in terms of heart health, reduction of type 2 diabetes, cancer risk, and other metabolic diseases.
Yeah. Well, I'm right there with you. I love fruits and vegetables. I'm a huge fan of I do eat meat, half Argentine. I mean, and chicken, and I'm not a big fan of fish. I keep working on this, but can't seem to quite get there. But I don't eat them in excess. The things that I feel are very, very easy for people to overeat are starch fat or starch sugar fat combinations. It's just the brain and gut respond with signals that scream more.
Right.
It's very hard for people to do like a slice of pizza. I love pizza. It can be done, but it's just very hard for people to do. It's like the stop signals just are all pushed down, and the go signals are all go.
So reducing white foods as much as possible is what
White foods?
Yeah. So the white flour, white rice, white pasta, things that are not as colorful. If you're eating a slice of bread and it just dissolves in your mouth,
it's sugar.
Not so good.
This is more of an editorial reflection again, but it's also, I was looking at the history of nutrition in this country. You're Canadian by birth, right? I detected that. And I don't know what the sort of traditional fare is in Canada, but if you look at the history of food in the United States, it's never been particularly healthy. The foods that we consider like American foods, hamburgers, hot dogs, French fries, corn dogs, fried chicken, donuts, like we've never been healthy about food. People probably just moved a lot, ate less, smoked a lot more, which is an appetite suppressant, but gives you cancer, kills you. We've never been that healthy with respect to food. Maybe food volume was more in check. But if you look at traditional food in Europe, probably in Canada, what sort of are the foods nourishing and healthy? I think we're sort of in this like delusion that like we were once healthy about food in this country. We were never healthy about food. The food was always pretty weak in terms of nutritional status, except for fruits, vegetables, and some animal products.
Yeah. I think portion size has a lot to do with it too. So I know moving from Canada to the US, go to a restaurant, the portion sizes are so big. It would never have occurred to me to take home doggy bag at a restaurant ever. And then here it's like kind of have to, or else, you're throwing away half your plate, or unless you're finishing the whole thing. So portion size, I think, is a big one. And also the foods are different in a way. We were talking about yogurt. So there are two things. When I moved to the US, the first thing the dietitian at my work told me was, do not buy bagged bread. I was like, okay. What does that mean? Don't buy bagged bread. That's what I always do. No, it's just you go to the grocery store, you go to the bakery section, they'll cut it up for you. You ask what you want. Don't buy bagged bread. It's like, okay, I'm not going to buy bagged bread. So apparently she was talking about like too many additives, too much sugar, or whatever. Okay. We're talking about like the bread that just melts in your mouth. So, and then the other thing was yogurt. I eat yogurt quite a bit. And then the yogurt here in the US tasted sweeter to me. The same thing, the same yogurt. Canada, here, the same name, the same everything. It was sweeter. And I didn't know why, but then it occurred to me that, foods are formulated in different ways in different countries to appeal to the population of that country. So yogurt was one where it's a little less sweet in Canada than in the US, and it was less sweet even than in Europe than Canada and US. So there's things like that don't necessarily help. Yeah.
We love our sugars and fats in the United States. And I think we paid a substantial health debt as a consequence. I mean, now, again, I don't have the numbers on this, but with retatrutide and the other GLPs, I've never tried them, but a lot of people are finding it much easier, if not easy, to lose weight that they just couldn't before. They just could not control their appetite. And they're just not as interested in these foods. There's this argument that maybe they're not as interested in everything in life. And that's a important question that needs to be resolved.
But I do think that things are changing. I think we're finding a lot more, for example, the yogurt, right? There was a lot more plain yogurt options than there were, when I first moved to the US. So there's,
things are changing. There's been a lot of resistance. And I think that the resistance has been sociological in the sense that, there's been a resistance to people being healthy. There really has. There's this idea that like if you're eating clean, you have an eating disorder. I did an episode about eating disorders. I talked to a lot of experts in this, including the group at Columbia Med that works on eating disorders. The frequency of anorexia, the most deadly psychiatric illness of all the psychiatric illnesses, hadn't realized that, is not increasing as a function of social media or magazines or anything. It's been very steady for maybe hundreds of years. It's a real neurological issue. There's obviously social pressures and things like that, but what I discovered in like talking to experts like Joanna Steinberg at Columbia and others is that, there is this So that was about anorexia, but what I'm about to say is separate. There's this notion that if you're going to be thoughtful about what you eat, or maybe you're not going to eat too late, or you're going to skip dessert, or until a few years ago, like if you're not going to drink alcohol, like there's something wrong with you, like that you're being restrictive somehow. I think, again, it's kind of like the parallels to Europe are kind of interesting, or the contrasts to Europe are interesting, where there's a lot of social convention built up around food that was healthy. And I think in the United States, the social conventions built up around food and alcohol were pretty unhealthy. It was like, everyone does this. Like, everyone eats hot dogs at the game. And hot dogs at a baseball game are a great thing. It's like nothing is as American as that, except maybe apple pie, right? But there's this, when people start making choices in the direction of their health, it was, and to some extent it still is, there's this quieter undercurrent of, well, like, are you being restrictive? Like, are you really going to live like that? But then you look at the health outcomes. And culturally, until a few years ago, it was considered very not okay to say that obesity was a health risk. And now the open discussion about obesity and metabolic health as like a real health risk. I think now we're kind of like in the actual discussion that for a long time it was like, Speaking of which, and kind of things outside the box, there's a paper on your CV that I could not help but ask about. Snack chips fried in corn oil alleviate cardiovascular risk factors when substituted for low-fat and high-fat snacks.
Yep.
What? What?
Yes.
Tell me the data. I believe you. I'm just like, what? This is wild.
This was funded by Frito-Lay. At that time, they had changed the oil that they were using to fry their corn chips. So this was Doritos, Fritos, Cheetos, and just Tito's. All the
Eatos. Yeah. All the Eatos.
All the Eatos. And so they had changed to corn oil. They're like, this is an oil that's higher in polyunsaturated fats than what we usually have.
What were they using before?
I'm not sure. I forget.
But it wasn't tallow.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Like, does it make a difference? Is it going to improve health if people choose those snacks compared to other snacks? So we had 3 arms in that study. Each person went through each of the 3 arms. It was for 25 days. The question was, okay, let's say you have a choice for a snack today, and you're going to go to the vending machine, and you have your option to eat a low-fat, high-carbohydrate snack, a high-fat, high-saturated snack, or those chips. So you just pick one, and that's that. So I think it was 2 snacks a day for 25 days. It was a rotation. So they had 4 different chips. So it was 2 one day, 2 the next day, like that for 25 days, and then the controls. And yeah, the better lipid profile was the one from the corn chips. They had the better lipids, yeah, and they had less lipoprotein little a, which is another factor, cardiometabolic risk factor. Data.
Well, I know that in the head-to-head comparison of seed oils, of which corn is, right, with saturated fat, this is where kind of the contention starts to erupt, where there are many studies now, I think, showing that when you substitute saturated fat with seed oils, that cardiometabolic risk factors go down. And this is true, right? Yeah. Well, by the way, I'm just going to say, I avoid seed oils actively because I like olive oil and butter, mostly olive oil. I avoid seed oils. I don't like the way they taste. I love olive oil.
Okay.
And there's some health effects of olive oil. Yeah. And I eat small amounts of butter. And so I just like duck the whole controversy, right? And you have to make sure you're getting real olive oil, but that can be done. When you look at the studies that compare saturated fat to seed oils, you do see better outcomes for seed oils. But then there's this crowd that comes in and says, but that's on a backdrop of reasonably high carbohydrate intake. When you start replacing some of those carbohydrates with lower carbohydrate diet, increasing protein intake, so not keto, but kind of like lower-ish starch and sugar, then maybe that balances out. Okay. But the big contention seems to be around the processing of these seed oils. This idea that especially when you make things like chips, that when you take fats and you combine them with carbohydrate and you heat them up a lot, that you create factors that are not good for the body. What is the evidence for or against that?
Well, so different oils have different smoke points, right? So each oil should be used for its appropriate usage, right? So cooking process. So I think that's where, people think that they should be using one type of oil for everything that they do. But some oil, like you wouldn't put flaxseed oil, for example, and heat it up to very high temperature.
Are you a fan of flaxseed oil?
I'm a fan of every liquid oil. I have no personal
You seem very healthy.
Restriction on the on the types of oils. I think that oils that remain liquid at room temperature. That should be your barometer for what's better to use. I'm also not saying that people should avoid butter like the plague, right? So all in moderation is okay.
Is there any reason I just can't find the argument for why anyone would replace olive oil with a seed oil.
Olive oil has a lower smoke point than other seed oils. So peanut oil, for example, has a higher smoke point. So you can fry in peanut oil. You wouldn't fry anything in olive oil.
I wouldn't eat anything fried.
Well,
yeah.
So that's a different question. But so depending on how you want to use your oil, then also some people find olive oil in baked goods might impart stronger taste. So depending on the type, so some of them are more flavorful, right? And so they're more fragile, let's say, and they'll impart flavors to different foods where they're not supposed to be.
So you're not seed oil averse, nor are you pro seed oil, is what I'm hearing.
Personally?
Yeah.
No. Because
I think that the seed oil debate has been very contaminated by the issues that I mentioned before, but also because many, many processed foods contain seed oil. Mm-hmm. They're much less expensive than using, grass-fed butter or olive oil or even just ordinary butter. So
it's important to be nutrition facts literate. So when you're talking about processed foods, so as much as possible, cooking at home, but that's something that a lot of people don't really know how to do, feel they don't have the time for.
People aren't going to start doing that.
And then
I'll tell you, they're not going to start doing that. And then I wish they would, but they're not going to.
At the grocery store, to look at the nutrition facts panel and being like, okay, what's in here, what's in there, and comparing products to one another, right? And also what's more important for your own health, right? What's relevant for my health may not be what's relevant for your health. Some people we were talking about salt sensitivity. Some people are very salt sensitive. Some people are very active and need to replace salt. And so salt is not an issue for them. But so being able to know what to pay attention to, because otherwise it just gets overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the study was paid for by a company. And earlier you mentioned companies. I think this is an important issue that we've never really directly addressed on this podcast. I mean, anytime I've covered a paper sometimes I do these solo episodes. I'll get back to them soon. I used to do a lot more of them. But I would always look, are there financial conflicts of interest? What's the difference between a company funding a study and a financial conflict of interest, if any? Like to me, a financial conflict of interest is if the investigators, the scientists running the study, have stakes in, they have shares in the company or they're being paid to do the study, obviously. Mm-hmm. But when a company funds research on this, the snack chips study that you did, I think everyone would like to assume that they don't have you're not feeling there's no explicit nor implicit pressure for a particular outcome.
Right.
Could you, how does this stuff come about?
So I'm glad you're asking that question, because that's something that people often have this knee-jerk reaction to industry-sponsored studies. And I know there are people who are very, very vocal against industry-sponsored research. But as scientists, we do research to the best of our abilities. And we draft the research question, you get the data, you analyze it, you publish it. Some of the studies that I haven't been able to publish have been funded by industry that have had null results.
Null results.
Right. So we did a study. It was sponsored by industry. We didn't find any significant effect of the test product compared to the control.
And you can't publish it.
We wrote the paper. We wrote the report. We provided it to our sponsor, just out of courtesy. So this is the paper. We're going to submit it for publication. Do what you need to do.
So they've given you the green light to submit it. So the companies aren't short-circuiting
No,
this.
Never. That's in the contract, right? Your right to publish. Because otherwise, why'd you do research? There's no point of doing research if you're not going to be able to publish your research. So basically, it's courtesy to show the paper that you're going to be submitting for publication. That one paper that I'm referring to, I must have tried 5 different journals. But the findings are not exciting. They're showing that there's no effect on our outcomes. And it got rejected. And I'm pretty persistent. I ran out of steam. So if I run out of steam, I can imagine so many other people, other scientists who have null results have run out of steam much quicker than me.
So that's a null result issue. It's not necessarily unique to industry-funded studies.
No, that's not unique. Yeah. So industry-sponsored studies, I often also say we get NIH reports of scientific misconduct. So reports of scientific misconducts can be found from NIH-sponsored studies where they find that the principal investigator falsified data that have been published in a specific paper. So to me, if you're not an honest scientist, obviously I don't think it matters who's sponsoring your research because the NIH finds misconduct.
Right. I mean, doing science for any other reason than trying to find real answers is just insane. Like, I mean, these people who do this are like legitimately sick. You know, like, yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a lot of work.
Well, do they really think they discovered something if they made it up? It's like it doesn't.
Where is that going to go?
It doesn't compute. Well, it never ends well. And you know, we could spend hours talking about the cases. These things always comes out in the wash.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing that negative outcomes are hard to publish. When you take on funding from a company to address a particular question about a product that they sell, it sounds to me, I want to be careful I'm not like leading the witness here, that you don't, it doesn't sound like you feel any pressure to give them a particular answer.
No.
So what's their interest in doing this? Like why are they funding studies? I mean, companies are selfish and they should be. They have shareholders and they need to, some of them are public companies. And so the shareholders are the public. And so why are they funding research? I mean, plenty of people eat chips.
Yeah.
Why are they funding research?
They wanted to know if it had a health benefit.
So they could market a health benefit.
Probably market a health benefit at some point. That could be. And then if they don't find a health benefit, maybe they could switch it to something else, right? I don't know.
I'm very sympathetic to the reality that there isn't a lot of research funding coming through NIH and NSF these days, but always it's been, it's been low. I know because I sat on study sections which dole out grants. I got grants, but it's very, very, very competitive. Are you taking money from companies to do this work because it's a great way to fund studies? Like, in other words, if NIH had more money to study nutrition, I could imagine a world where you would just take money from NIH to do it. Like, you wouldn't need the money.
Yeah, because companies. The budgets are better from NIH funding than from industry funding for nutrition research. But if you could get an NIH grant, that's the ultimate goal, right? Or USDA or other government grant. That's the goal. But sometimes also there's specific foods, specific products that would be kind of hard to study without industry support because you need to get access to this specific food or product.
Well, I don't know what the status of it is right now, but my fairly frequent kind of check-in on what the at least stated goals of the now being revised NIH include creating a forum, even some incentive for publishing negative results or null results, I should say. Jay Bhattacharya, who's been on this podcast, I just put that out publicly. We need those results. They're important. They steer people away from certain things that need to be steered away from. And also, it seems, at least from the whole food pyramid revision, et cetera, that there seems to be more and more interest in nutrition as a research topic and something to really understand. So obviously it's really important. I mean, people are eating every day.
Yeah.
They're making these choices. So there should be more federal funding for these things. And then there's no chance of bias. Right. Yeah, I think that people assume that if industry funded a study that, especially on food, that like something's not to be trusted in there.
I don't know why for food in particular, right? So if you think about it.
Food and drug companies.
But drug companies, they do research on their own products all the time.
Most of the R&D for drug companies is definitely done in-house. That's also part of the scary part about it. We don't see the null results. I actually would prefer if it took on a different shape. I don't know exactly what it would look like. I mean, we don't see a lot of the negative outcomes that might exist. So I don't think there's
probably they just die out before they make it to next step.
I think outright scientific fraud, people making stuff up, is pretty rare.
Very rare.
But I do think there's a lot of questions about people, because of the incentives to need to publish, and as you described, it's hard to publish null results. We will never know, and this is when you run a lab, is you want to create a culture where graduate students and postdocs feel very comfortable saying there's nothing here.
Right.
Because the stuff that didn't work out, you always, it's just a question that you always have, like what stuff do we never hear about? Because the negative results, like they say, well, that mouse was sick, or this, there's a lot of, the brain is a crazy thing.
That's why you need to teach the students well, right? You have a student who comes to you and says, hey, this is lower, or this is better than this. And you look at the numbers and you say, well, it's 25 versus 27 and the standard deviation is 10. Like, no, 25 is the same as 27, right? So you have to make sure you teach well to know that, even numerically different effects may not be statistically significantly different. And that's just part of the curve, right?
Yeah, the ideal situation is when the student or postdoc doesn't believe their own results. They're like, it's not real. And then you have to convince them, actually, you have something interesting. That's a good situation.
Yeah, that's a good situation.
That's a good situation. And then eventually they're like, oh, okay, that's the ideal situation. But I think this whole field of nutrition is contentious for some of the right reasons. It's so very important. And I think it's contentious also for a lot of unfortunate and unnecessary reasons. Among the students and postdocs and general public, when you interact, what are people most interested in with respect to nutrition? Like when people ask you, is it like, what should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? Like what's coming? Like what are your antennae picking up when you're out there?
I think what should I eat? Or, or have you heard about XYZ fad? That's also one. Have you heard that whatever product cures everything in the world? No, I haven't heard that. I'm
peptides?
surprised.
Or is it like very peptide? Right now, peptides are really big.
It's always something else. Yeah.
So it's very specific to a product.
Yeah, often very specific to a product. Yeah.
You won't be held responsible for your answer, but do you supplement your diet with minerals like magnesium or anything like that? Or are you just completely careful food choices?
I prefer careful food choices. I think it's more pleasurable to eat a complete food diet. That said, I think that there are some people who may need to supplement their diets, but I think people should strive to get their nutrients from whole foods.
Fiber recommendations are really growing. I looked into this, and many people's doctors are now telling them you should take a little bit of psyllium husk. I always thought, by the way, psyllium husk was like the husks. Like you had to you're going to eat like the seed husks. Yeah. It's actually ground into a powder or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm still afraid to take it, but I should take a little bit of it. But doctors now are prescribing supplemental fiber and in a pretty high rate from what I understand.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. People don't want to eat their fruits and vegetables.
But it brings so much more, right? So yes, there's fiber in fruits and vegetables, but there's also all sorts of polyphenols, right? All sorts of non-nutrient components that themselves may have benefits for health that we don't fully understand yet, that feed your gut, that are maybe just as relevant, that may enhance fiber's impact on health.
Listen, I'm preaching to the choir. I love fruits and vegetables. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. You have a very unique research program. I have to say, very few people can work on as many different things and find their points of intersection. And so I'm grateful that you're exploring these things. I appreciate your openness about industry-funded research. This is something that I think people need to know about. I certainly learned about that from you today. And based on your work, I think it's fair to say that we shouldn't just be encouraging people to get great sleep. We should be encouraging people to eat at times and foods that allow them to get great sleep, which will allow them to get better, make better food choices.
Yes.
And so forth.
Yeah. So, I talk often about a vicious cycle where you don't sleep well, you don't eat well, then that makes you not sleep so well. And really hoping for people to get into a healthful cycle, right? Where you get good sleep, where you can make good food choices that then helps you get better sleep to keep propelling this cycle of better health.
I love it. It's a true integrative medicine and science. I also can attest that when you sleep well, you make better food choices. When you eat well, you sleep better.
Right.
So thank you so much for coming, for taking time out of your schedule. Really appreciate it. And I've learned a ton. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for today's discussion with Dr. Marie-Pierre St-Onge. To learn more about her laboratory's research and to find a link to her book, Eat Better, Sleep Better, please see the links in the show note captions. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a terrific zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please follow the podcast by clicking the follow button on both Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. And you can now leave us comments at both Spotify and Apple. Please also check out the sponsors mentioned at the beginning and throughout today's episode. That's the best way to support this podcast. If you have questions for me or comments about the podcast, or guests or topics that you'd like me to consider for the Huberman Lab podcast, please put those in the comment section on YouTube. I do read all the comments. For those of you that haven't heard, I have a new book coming out. It's my very first book. It's entitled Protocols, an operating manual for the human body. This is a book that I've been working on for more than 5 years, and that's based on more than 30 years of research and experience. And it covers protocols for everything from sleep to exercise to stress control, protocols related to focus and motivation. And of course, I provide the scientific substantiation for the protocols that are included. The book is now available by pre-sale at protocolsbook.com. There you can find links to various vendors. You can pick the one that you like best. Again, the book is called Protocols, an operating manual for the human body. And if you're not already following me on social media, I am Huberman Lab on all social media platforms. So that's Instagram, X, Threads, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And on all those platforms, I discuss science and science-related tools, some of which overlaps with the content of the Huberman Lab podcast, but much of which is distinct from the information on the Huberman Lab podcast. Again, it's Huberman Lab on all social media platforms. And if you haven't already subscribed to our Neural Network newsletter, the Neural Network newsletter is a zero-cost monthly newsletter that includes podcast summaries as well as what we call protocols in the form of 1 to 3 page PDFs that cover everything from how to optimize your sleep, how to optimize dopamine, deliberate cold exposure. We have a foundational fitness protocol that covers cardiovascular training and resistance training. All of that is available completely zero cost. You simply go to hubermanlab.com, go to the menu tab in the top right corner, scroll down to newsletter, and enter your email. And I should emphasize that we do not share your email with anybody. Thank you once again for joining me for today's discussion with Dr. Marie-Pierre St-Onge. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for your interest in science.